So much has been said to criticise the modern era of Star Trek movies and TV shows that I wanted to make sure I wasn't just getting swept away in the excitement of having my beloved show back. So I've rewatched some new Trek and some old Trek, and I just wanted to give you some thoughts on the matter. Now, if this is your first contact with us, welcome aboard. My name's Carl Bromley, and this is the Trekkies Guide to the Galaxy. So, where to begin this comparison? Well, there are a few areas that Trek fans have latched onto as to why they don't like the current era of movies and TV shows. Now, I just want to make it clear from the outset that I intend to talk about the content of Star Trek, not its creators and writers, not its cast and crew, because, quite frankly, I feel that if you're going to try and use those points to say that the creative work of everyone involved isn't true Star Trek, then you really have missed the point of Star Trek. Now, what I'm going to do for this video is focus on one of the areas that Star Trek fans seem to be disappointed with, and that is that the modern versions of Star Trek present a much grittier and darker view of the future than perhaps we're used to seeing from previous Star Trek shows. So what I'm going to do is pick out some examples from the previous 4 decades of Star Trek to show just how dark it can and has at times been. Now, it's quite likely at points I'll seem like I'm ranting or droning on a bit, but please stick with me to the end because I do have a point to make. So, we start our journey back with Star Trek, the original series. That's right, good old Captain Kirk, Spock and Dr. McCoy. There weren't any dark and depressing episodes back then, surely. Let me remind you about a little episode from the very first season called The City on the Edge of Forever. First aired in 1967, this episode sees Dr. McCoy suffering from a temporary insanity after accidentally injecting himself with a near-lethal dose of cordrazine, whilst the crew are investigating a strange time portal. McCoy, in his delusional state, ends up jumping through the Guardian of Forever and travelling back to the 1930s, where he does something to disrupt the timeline. In order to fix this, Kirk and Spock are forced to follow him back to repair the damage. Well, that doesn't sound too dark and gritty now, does it? Kirk and Spock find themselves taking refuge in the 21st Street mission, which is run by a young lady named Edith Keeler, played by Joan Collins. Now bear in mind the period in which we find ourselves. It's the height of the Great Depression. No money, no jobs, no hope. Yet there's this amazing woman who has an inspirational view of the future. Ideas about how mankind can put aside their differences and pool resources for a greater purpose. How science will pave the way for exploration to the stars. Even Kirk falls for the charm and purity of this unique individual, confessing to Spock that he loves her. She's a shining beacon in an otherwise very dark era. Sounds pretty good so far, eh?
Edith Keeler must die.
Wait, what?
Jim, Edith Keeler must die.
What the? How the hell?
There's no mistake, Captain. Let me run it again. Edith Keeler, founder of the peace movement.
But she was right. Peace was the way.
She was right, but at the wrong time. With the A-bomb and with their V-2 rockets to carry them, Germany captured the world.
No.
And all this because McCoy came back and somehow kept her from dying in a street accident, as she was meant to.
Oh. So in order to save the bright future that is Star Trek, this amazing woman, the woman that Kirk loves, this light in the dark, must be allowed to die. And not only that, Kirk has to actively prevent her from being saved by Dr. McCoy. Is that dark enough for you? No? Well, how about the episode Space Seed, another original series classic from Season 1? We're shooting through the stars as usual when the Enterprise comes across an old D-100 Earth sleeper ship, a piece of history well worth investigating. On board we find not one, not two, but 72 living relics from another dark era in Earth's history, the Eugenics War. When we learn this, you'd be forgiven for thinking, hey, maybe these people blasted off to get away from all the death and destruction, to start a new life away from all the horrors of war. They'll at least be able to fill in some gaps in the history books from a period where the records are sketchy at best. I know, we'll beam aboard with our resident historian, Lieutenant MacGyver, and take a look. Hey, this one's waking up. Pretty neat, right? Wrong. They've actually just woken up one of the most ruthless villains in the history of Star Trek, Khan Noonien Singh, a tyrannical product of human selective breeding that is hell-bent on taking over not just the Enterprise, or even a planet. Oh no, he wants the universe. And to make it happen, he's more than happy to physically and emotionally abuse people, namely Lieutenant MacGyver, in order to gain their loyalty. Needless to say, he's not opposed to torture and murder either. Fortunately, MacGyver comes to her senses and realises what she's done, helping Kirk to escape and overcome Khan. But that's not the end of it. Such is Khan's hold over her, she chooses to go into exile with him and his people on Ceti Alpha 5, with the promise of being able to start a new life and build a new world, which, let's be honest, it's not a bad consequence, really, when you consider the crimes they've committed not only on the Enterprise, but on Earth 200 years earlier before they left. So, who's won this round? Not that it's all roses for Khan and his followers, as we find out in what's widely agreed to be one of the best Star Trek movies ever. Months after they were left, the neighbouring planet exploded, shifting the orbit of Ceti Alpha 5 and making it a near uninhabitable wasteland, where the only surviving indigenous life form is a slug that slips in through your ear and wraps itself around your cerebral cortex, making you highly susceptible to suggestion, slowly causing madness and eventually death. Well, that's not dark and gritty at all, is it? So, how does Khan use his superior intellect to save his people? He purposely implants these slugs into Chekhov and Captain Terrell, steals the USS Reliant, marooning its crew on Ceti Alpha 5, and goes on a revenge mission against the now Admiral Kirk to avenge the death of his wife, Lieutenant MacGyver. And Khan doesn't pull any punches during his ruthless campaign. He attacks the Enterprise, only stopping for a moment to gloat to Kirk, which fortunately gives Kirk and the crew the chance to fight back and limp away, only for them to discover that the research station that they were already heading to has already been visited by Khan, and he has mercilessly killed all the innocent scientists aboard in a most horrific way and then strung their bodies up for the next unexpected visitors to find them. Anyway, Khan throws a few more punches, Kirk shouts, "Khan! Khan!" and eventually defeats his adversary in a spectacular display of tactical genius. So, Khan activates the life-creating bomb that he's stolen in a last-ditch attempt to kill Kirk, but they manage to get warp power back just in time to get away thanks to the self-sacrifice of Spock. That's right, Spock dies. One of our most beloved characters has to sacrifice himself to save his shipmates. This is nothing compared to the dark and gritty current era of Star Trek that everyone's complaining about, right? The Next Generation Season 4 episode, The Drumhead, has high-ranking Starfleet official Nora Sati conducting a spy hunt, which through her own prejudices and paranoia turns into a witch hunt, during which she even brings Captain Picard into her sights in her effort to save the Federation from treachery and conspiracies. But worse still, she targets a hard-working young medical technician, Simon Tarsis, purely based on his bloodline and heritage, putting him in an open court hearing in front of the rest of the crew, which could potentially incite unfounded hatred and bias. She even goes so far as to make up evidence that would circumstantially incriminate him. So strong is her desire to prove her conspiracy theory correct. In Deep Space Nine's Season 6 episode, In the Pale Moonlight, Captain Sisko is telling us the story of how he makes a very questionable decision to bring the Romulans into the Dominion War by deceit, deception, and, as he puts it to Garak,
I am prepared to do whatever it takes to accomplish that goal.
He agrees to Garak organising the fabrication of evidence that falsely implicates the Dominion plotting to attack the Romulan Empire, frees a convicted criminal from the Klingons, who in turn tries to kill Quark, so Sisko has to buy Quark's silence, and, after being exposed by Senator Vreenak,
It's a fake!
And Vreenak's shuttle being destroyed en route back to Romulus by Garak, which Sisko goes ape about and punches Garak because he realises that that was actually Garak's plan all along, even though Sisko did say to him,
I am prepared to do whatever it takes to accomplish that goal.
He tells us that after all that, he can live with himself, because the Romulans did enter the war, and it will turn the tides. Yeah, great justification there from one of Starfleet's best for ignoring his own principles. Voyager, Janeway kills Tuvix. The Doctor's holographic child dies. The Bride of Chaotica. Okay, that one's just in there for a bit of light comic relief. Enterprise, pretty much the whole of Season 3, especially the episodes Damage and Similitude. Need I go on? Okay then. Picard's revenge mission against the Borg in Star Trek First Contact, the forced relocation of a race so the Federation can steal their natural resources in Star Trek Insurrection, Shinzon, the mad clone of Picard, who assassinates the Romulan Senate and threatens to destroy Earth with a high-yield radiation weapon, which is ultimately stopped by another one of our beloved main characters having to sacrifice his life. Get to the point! My point is that all these things either ask serious moral questions or they're the setup for the hope at the end of the story. And I think that's what people aren't recognising in the modern era of Star Trek. It's easy to dismiss a series as too dark and gritty when at least half of the episodes are the setup for the light at the end of the tunnel that teaches us the moral lesson. Now, I know as Trekkies we're used to having a story told to us over 45 minutes or even a couple of hours in one of the feature films, but you've got to look at these new series as a whole, because that's what they are. They're a story that's told over multiple episodes. At the end of Discovery Season 2, we see the crew of our hero ship sacrificing themselves to an unknown future where they will never see any of their loved ones ever again, all to save all sentient life. In Picard, after being beaten down for most of the series with one defeat after another, Picard is willing to lay his own life on the line in an effort to teach Soji, a person that he saves and that subsequently helps imprison him and almost helps to destroy all life in the galaxy, that she has the power to make the right choice, not only for herself, but for everyone. Are you seeing the theme here? The night is darkest before the dawn, and without that setup, we don't get the payoff, or at least that payoff doesn't have the impact it's intended to. Would we really grasp the moral lessons that Star Trek's trying to teach us if it didn't show us what the alternative is? I know that as a young teenage boy watching Star Trek, I didn't always understand the social, political and moral stories that the show was putting across to me. Back then I was just a big geek and thought it was really cool. But looking back at it now, I appreciate that what I watched on Star Trek helped shape the person that I am today and the way I view the world. And I, for one, am glad that Star Trek has always pushed those boundaries and has sometimes shown us the darker side of humanity, and that it continues to do so through its new shows. Because without it, that payoff of me having what I consider to be a fairly decent moral compass could well have been a much harder lesson to learn. So, In conclusion, and in my humble opinion, I would say that one of the biggest problems that people have with current era Star Trek isn't really a problem at all. Most of the examples that I've used in this video of dark and gritty Star Trek from the last 40 years have been voted for time and time again as some of the greatest moments in Star Trek history, by the very same people that are now complaining that Star Trek's too dark and gritty. So, therefore, I would conclude that yes, Star Trek Discovery and Picard are true Star Trek. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video, folks, and don't forget, smash the like button if you have. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this subject. Please drop them down in the comments below, and be sure to check out some of the other content that we've got here on the channel. We'd love it if you'd consider subscribing to us, and that way you'll find out whenever we post any new content. So, until next time, set a course for home, maximum warp, engage.